The Justice Department argues the government is not required to provide toothbrushes and soap to detained migrant children if they're staying for shorter periods of time. A lawyer for the DOJ reportedly argued this week those items aren't mandated under an agreement that requires certain sanitary and safety standards. A panel of judges questioned the lawyer over reports that children had to sleep on cold concrete floors. Advocates with the group Human Rights Watch say children at some of the border facilities told them they hadn't been able to shower in weeks. And last month, a government watchdog agency found dangerous overcrowding and unsanitary conditions at a facility in El Paso, Texas. The watchdog says the Department of Homeland Security must develop an immediate plan to address overcrowding. It's still unclear when the court will decide on the issue of providing toiletries.
A stunning story that we're covering here at CNN. Babies wearing only diapers or filthy onesies, unsanitary conditions, no soap, not enough beds, kids sleeping on the hard floor. Those are just some of the conditions that are reported at U.S. Customs and Border Protection facilities in Texas by a team of monitors, independent monitors who went in there. One team member describes the situation as a, quote, pervasive health crisis. Correspondent Nick Valencia has been on this story. Walk us through some of the main concerns that were reported. And one of the ones that stuck out to me, Nick, was that all of the kids appeared to be sick.
Yeah, all of the children, nearly all of them that they interviewed, and they interviewed more than 30 of them, appeared to be ill in some way. And I had a chance to speak with several of the monitors, inspectors, part of this mission, 4-day trip to the southern border where they visited 3 facilities. And it was specifically one facility, Brianna, the Clint Border Patrol Station, that they described the conditions as unconscionable. And they said that there is a pervasive health crisis currently happening along the U.S. southern border. And here's some of the things that they tick off. Things like a shortage of beds, kids sleeping on the ground, some of them without mattresses. In other situations and instances, kids were in the interview room showing up in dirty diapers or filthy onesies. One teenager said that he hadn't taken a shower in nearly 3 weeks. Now, these conditions are dangerous conditions, according to these legal monitors who went in. Among them was Clara Long. She's a senior researcher at Human Rights Watch. She's also a parent. And leaving this facility, she said she left heartbroken.
Well, it just makes my heart hurt to think about what kind of lasting damage these experiences might have for these kids. I came home and was hanging out with my 3-year-old, and he's playing around and so happy, and I couldn't help but think about all the 3-year-olds who I spoke with over the past couple of days who were shut down, not speaking, crying, obviously very traumatized.
Now, this team of 10, part of them were doctors, lawyers, and other volunteers there as inspectors to make sure that the government is held accountable for this Flores settlement, which says that a child should not be held unnecessarily long or delayed in their release. I did reach out to Customs and Border Protection. One official with intimate knowledge of these Border Patrol stations in El Paso says that the conditions migrants are now being held in are better than they were a year ago and even better than they were just 3 months ago. Brianna, very quickly, another Customs and Border Protection official tells me this is the reason why Congress must act and approve $4.6 billion in emergency funding so kids aren't being held in conditions like this. Brianna.
All right, Nick Valencia, thank you so much. Let's talk to a member of Congress about this. Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal is with us. She is on the Judiciary Committee. And Congresswoman, I mean, you hear this report. I mean, it's hard to hear the details of what these kids are facing. I'm sorry, it really bothers me as a parent. But when you see this, and also when you hear Border Patrol saying that they need this money, is that going to solve the problem?
Brianna, no. And this, I mean, it is so heartbreaking, and I think it is worse than unconscionable if that's possible. And the problem is that these conditions have been there. We have not been complying with Flores for some time. And so just approving money to a lawless administration who is creating these conditions at the border, you've seen the administration is willing to take money from other places for a border wall, but they certainly are not willing to actually put money into these conditions. It's been a longer standing issue than just the last several months, as your reporter said. And I think on top of that, we have to think about how this happened. There are many ways to deal with this. Number one, dealing with the conditions in these migrating countries that are sending people here. For people to be in those conditions, you can only imagine how afraid they are for their lives in fleeing. And the Trump administration has cut off aid to Central American countries. Number two, they've stopped all legal processing of, I shouldn't say all, it's at a trickle for legal processing of asylum seekers through this metering process that they have. And number three, they are not putting resources into getting agents to the border to process people and get them out of those conditions. And the money that is in the supplemental that is being requested by the administration, there are pieces of that I think, particularly for Health and Human Services, that I think Democrats, somebody like me who's been to those conditions and been in those heartbreaking situations, I would be willing to support that. But they're also asking for money for other pieces at the same time that they're declaring raids on families across the country. They are not using the money we give them for the purposes that we give it to them for. And so that has been a real concern for us. And we believe that they could immediately address many of the humanitarian crises. I know that many of my colleagues have put together a border supplemental, but I think our concern for some of us is, what are they going to do with the money? Are they going to put it towards the border wall, or are they actually going to use it for something that makes a difference?
So you visited, is that right? You have visited. What have you, when you hear this description, these descriptions, and this is not just one facility, we're talking about multiple, is that in line with what you saw, or did you see a different degree of issue?
No, it is. I think it's gotten worse. For sure, because the last time I was there was several months ago, and I think it has gotten increasingly worse. But this has been a problem in terms of conditions of meeting the Flores guidelines, the Flores obligations. These facilities have not been doing that, and we in Congress need to do a better job of tying their obligation to meet Flores with funding. And so this is the box that we're being put in, because they're not meeting those guidelines. And you can see that from all of these people that are going in. But yes, I saw kids, sick kids. I saw, and then of course we had the family separation, kids taken away from their parents. And I think that the reporter or the individual who said, what this does for children long term is I don't even have the words to describe it. These kids and these families are going to be affected for the very long term in terrible, terrible ways. And we, the United States government, is doing that to people.
Yeah, it's neglect that we're seeing. I do want to talk to you as a member of the House Judiciary Committee about the testimony of former Trump aide Hope Hicks. She had a closed-door hearing with you, and let's talk about some of the revelations here. She revealed that she does not believe the president was joking last week when he said he'd accept dirt on a political opponent from a foreign government. She does, however, think he was joking when he asked Russia during the election to find Hillary Clinton's missing emails. She also said the campaign was relieved when WikiLeaks published damaging information about Clinton. And she said that she called Michael Cohen during the campaign to see if he could look into rumors that TMZ had access to a tape of Donald Trump in Moscow, Russia, with prostitutes. And also in the 273 pages of testimony, she testified that she had dinner with President Trump in April, just 2 months ago. She said, though, that they just reminisced about the campaign. They did not talk about congressional investigations. And of course, as you're aware, because you were there, she didn't say a lot, right? In all, attorneys, mostly from the White House counsel's office, blocked Hicks from answering 155 questions, most of those related to her time in the White House, some as mundane as where her office was located in the West Wing. So I want to ask you, as you were looking at this, how would you overall describe what went on during this hearing?
Well, I think the main lesson is the White House is continuing to obstruct justice by not allowing Hope Hicks to testify. She did come forward, but every minute, as you saw in the testimony, with very few exceptions that you've mentioned, they objected. They objected to her saying where she sat. They objected to her saying whether or not she told the truth to Special Counsel Mueller. They literally objected to everything. And the interesting thing, Brianna, is they did not claim executive privilege because they know they can't. They They already waived executive privilege for her to talk to the Mueller report, to the Mueller team. They claim something called absolute immunity, which I'm having a hard time saying with a straight face because it's a ludicrous claim. And that is the unfortunate thing. But I think what it did do is it showed to the judge as we go into the courtroom, for Hope Hicks, but also for others, that the Trump administration is engaged in ongoing frivolous claims of absolute immunity and trying to stop and cover up what is happening and stop people from testifying to us. That much was clear. And then there were a tiny few pieces of nugget information that I think we did get out of Hope Hicks. There were a few times when she tried to answer a question and the White House immediately stopped her and jumped in and said, objection, objection, objection.
But what are you really learning? What are Democrats really learning in a way that these investigations you're doing, these interviews you're doing behind closed doors, that it's actually bringing forth information as you have, some of your colleagues are arguing, you're, I guess yourself included, that an impeachment inquiry could actually do away with all of these challenges to getting information?
Well, they wouldn't do away with all of the challenges, but what it would do is it would give us the ability to use those Article I powers, and if we did have to go to the courts, it would make it much, much harder for the administration to oppose us because these are critical issues. And I think that what we have to do now, because we haven't declared a formal impeachment inquiry, is the administration is continuing to use the argument that we don't have legislative authority over this information. Now, these are spurious claims. We believe courts will see it in our favor, but that is a much longer process.
Does it feel futile as you're taking this approach without more abilities to get to the bottom of some of these things?
Well, it does feel frustrating to hear White House officials, lawyers, 6 lawyers, her personal lawyers, White House lawyers, continuing to object to the American people having transparency. That feels incredibly frustrating. However, and I do believe, as you said, that I and almost 70 of my colleagues now, most of us on the Judiciary Democrat side, have come out believing that the White House is forcing us to open a formal impeachment inquiry so that we can get the facts and follow them to their conclusion and use our full powers as quickly as possible. This is a crisis. The Russians interfered in our elections, and the president is saying on national television that he's willing to take information if somebody offers it to him from a hostile foreign power. That is dangerous for all of us, and we need to resolve this immediately. And that's why I believe, and I have come out for an impeachment inquiry. I think it helps us get there quickest.
All right, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, thank you for being on.
Thank you, Brianna.